Hello everyone and welcome back to another roll call. As is tradition, we are going to randomly decide our character based on what species and what classes are left. And in this case, today we have a forest gnome barbarian. And I debated a little bit on which subclass to do, because out of the ones in the 2024 Player's Handbook, two of them are basically revamped from the original Player's Handbook. The Berserker, I almost wanted to go with Berserker, but in the end, I decided that I decided that it'd be better to do the World Tree Barbarian. I will do a Berserker at some point once we get through like the initial wave of classes, mostly because I just want to show how much improved it is. But World Tree is brand new, so I think we're going to do that. And of course, his name, as randomly decided by Xanathar's Guide to Everything, is going to be Dimble Fiddlefen. Now, the interesting thing about this, and also for background, we're going to do a soldier. I debated between farm and soldier, because those are the only two classes that give you both constitution and strength, so they're basically the only ones that are kind of optimal for barbarians. But we're going to go with soldier, proficiencies +2. And it's actually rather interesting, because in the old rule set, forest gnomes were at a disadvantage for kind of being barbarians, mostly because of the fact that they couldn't use two-handed weapons. If you were a small creature, you got disadvantaged for trying to use a weapon that was, I believe it was two-handed or heavy. I think it was one of the two. Honestly, most of the ones that are heavy are two-handed anyway, so they're kind of the same thing. And so if you wanted to do a gnome or a halfling barbarian and wanted to wield a weapon with two hands, you were stuck basically taking one of the versatile weapons that could be one-handed or two-handed, and then just always wielding it with two hands. That is not the case with the current rule set. With the current rule set, all you need to be able to wield a given weapon is the strength requirement for it. And most of those two-handed weapons, I believe the strength requirement is 13. So anyone who plays a martial class is going to have that 13. For scores, we're just going to go with the standard array. We do get, so we're going to do 15 in strength, but then we get +2 from being a soldier. So we're going to do that there. Dexterity, we're going to do a 13. Constitution, our other important stat, is going to be a 14, but then we're going to add our other +1 into that for a 15. Intelligence is going to be a 10. Wisdom is going to be a 12. And Charisma is going to be an 8. So this gives us a -1 to Charisma, a +1 to that, a +0 to that. Strength over here is going to be a +3, and that's because that's going to be our most important stat. Dexterity, a nice solid +1. Constitution, +2. Alright, so those are our stats. Let's see here. Next up, all characters now have a speed of 30 feet. By the old rule set, gnomes would have had 25 feet. I'm glad they changed that. I'm not a fan of kind of punishing players for, choosing a given race or a given class. Like to me, it's like, if you're all going to be playing this game, you should all have the same movement speed. There's really no mechanical reason why having that -5 should really be there, but that's neither here nor there. Alright, moving on. For soldier, we have the savage attacker feat, and what that does is whenever you hit with a weapon, a melee weapon, you then get to roll the damage die a second time, but you're not adding them together. It's basically advantage for the damage. So if the damage is 1d8, you roll a d8. If one is a 4 and one is an 8, you can choose either one of those, so you can choose the 8. Alright, the other thing we get is we get, let's see, where is it? Athletics from being a soldier, and then we also get intimidation for being a soldier. Now, like I said, pretty much strength and constitution are the only real stats that you're going to need as a barbarian. Everything else is kind of flavor. Dexterity is generally the third one you're going to want to do, mostly because that is going to help your unarmed defense, but generally barbarians don't use dexterity. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. If you don't want to be a dexterous barbarian, you can go ahead, but I will say probably don't give it an 8 because you don't want that -1 taken away from your AC. As for these three, the mental stats, the intelligence, wisdom, charisma, those are all flavor. And the one thing I always recommend to people who make a barbarian for the first time is decide which of these stats are going to be highest. Basically, one's going to be 0, one's going to be your other +1, one's going to be your -8. And the thing I recommend is use that to determine the kind of barbarian you're going to roleplay as. Because you can play a barbarian who's actually kind of like smart and tactical and like knows things. We think of barbarians as like, these, people dwelling in the in the fringes of society and nature and stuff like that. And that's true as a stereotype. But it is interesting, like, especially when you have, like, a look at the zealot barbarian. That's a barbarian that probably, lives in, like, cities and civilized places. They're just very uncouth. Wisdom, I think, is a very typical one for barbarians. Like, they're not always smart, but especially having perception is good. And playing the barbarian who can like notice things that are going on without necessarily being book smart is another big one that you can do. Charisma, again, I think most barbarians dump it because, again, like you're not going to be doing too many social things as a barbarian, but you could also make the case that you're the barbarian who's, a little bit charming, think almost Conan the Barbarian. Like, I think Conan the Barbarian is the kind of person who has that +1 charisma because, he always gets the ladies. Alright, and then, of course, we have 50 gold from our background. Alright. Oh, and I made a mistake here. That needs to be an S for small. Silly Corey. Alright, for things that we get from our species, the first thing we get is Gnomish Cunning. Now, what that's going to be is whenever you make a save that is any of the mental traits, so wisdom, intelligence, charisma. If you make a save on any of those, you get advantage with Gnomish Cunning, which is actually kind of a huge thing, because advantage can, really help turn the tide of things, especially if you roll poorly. And these three are going to be some of the most common saves. But pretty much these three and dexterity are some of the most common saves. I think you get intelligence and charisma a little more than wisdom, but generally the mental stats are going to be ones you're going to save on. Strength saves you don't come across often. Constitution saves you can, but generally most people have at least enough constitution to where it's not going to be a big deal for them. Next thing you're going to get is your Gnomish lineage. Now, as I established earlier, we are doing a forest gnome. And what that means is that we get two things. We get a minor illusion cantrip, and then we also get the Speak with Animals spell. Now, here's the trick with this, is barbarians don't spellcast. They just generally don't. In this case, because of our gnomish lineage, we can cast that spell without a spell slot a number of times equal to our proficiency bonus, and those come back on a long rest. So basically, we're not going to be able to really speak with animals a whole lot, but we'll still be able to. The other trick is that if you were, say, a wizard, you'd be able to cast Speak with Animals with any of your other spell slots. The barbarians don't get that. So as a result, the barbarian is only going to be casting this spell, via proficiency. So once he casts this proficiency, that's it. But I will say this is good. Some races will give you like attack cantrips, and you're generally not going to use those as a barbarian. Minor illusion and Speak with Animals are ones that you're largely going to do outside of combat. There's really not much call to talk to a like a dog outside of combat, or make an illusion outside of combat. So those are actually perfect. Those work very perfectly for our gnome. So our hit dice, we have 1d. Actually, no, we have 3d12 because we are level 3. And our hit points. Okay, so for hit points, our starting hit points are going to be 12 plus our Constitution modifier. So that's going to be 14. But now we have 2 additional levels above that, and those are going to be 7 plus Constitution modifier. So that's going to be 9. 9 and 9 is 18. 18 and 14. I'm really terrible at math. It's going to be 32. So we have 32 hit points. See, I got there eventually. Alright, so we got 32 hit points. Okay, on to the barbarian stuff proper. Our saving throws are strength and constitution. So we're going to do those. For skill proficiencies, we have animal handling, athletics, which we already have, intimidation, which we already have, nature, perception, and survival. So I'm going to go ahead and do perception, because that is just always a good one. And let's do nature. I feel like as a forest gnome, Dimble is going to be really big on nature. Later we might see if we can pick up survival or medicine. Okay, now we're getting on to barbarian stuff. So class features, we get the thing that you're all here for, the thing that every barbarian wants is rage. Rage is really awesome. They've improved it a lot in this new book here. Essentially what happens is when you rage, you get several things. You get damage resistance to most weapon attack damages, so bludgeoning, piercing, slashing damage. Basically, anytime you get hit with those, you're taking half damage. It's also why barbarians like that high constitution modifier, because we're already reducing the amount of damage we have coming in. Next, we have rage damage. They did make some changes. When you make an attack using strength with either a weapon or an unarmed strike, so it does work with unarmed strikes, and deal damage to a target, you gain a bonus damage that increases as you gain levels as a barbarian, as shown in the rage damage column. So in the case of a level 3 barbarian, you get 3 rages, and your rage damage is going to be plus 2. So anytime you're doing that damage, you're getting plus 2, and that actually works really well with Savage Attacker, because then you're going to be able to maximize your damage. You're going to be able to take that higher damage dice and add 2 to it. Alright, you have advantage on strength checks and saving throws while you are raging, which, we shouldn't really need because, again, we have that plus 3 and we have the proficiency in it, but it never hurts to have advantage. The downside is, as I mentioned before, you cannot concentrate on any spells or cast them. Now, here's where they change some things up a bit. The rage lasts until the end of your next turn, and it ends early if you don heavy armor or have the incapacitated condition. If your rage is still active on your next turn, you can extend the rage for another round by doing one of the following. Make an attack roll against an enemy, force an enemy to make a saving throw, take a bonus action to extend your rage. These are all very important, because it used to be that in order for your rage to keep going, you either had to make an attack or damage a creature. So the easiest way to basically, neutralize a barbarian was to disengage, get away from it, and then make it to where he wouldn't be able to attack you, because he had to use melee weapon attacks too. This one just says you have to make an attack roll against the enemy. So you, in theory, could make a ranged attack. Not many ranged attacks are going to use strength. Probably exception to that are going to be ones like, I think javelins can use strength. Again, as a barbarian, you're not going to be using ranged attacks too much anyway. But you just have to make an attack. So that's going to help it. You don't need to take damage, but you can also make an enemy do the saving throw, which is important, because I think there's times as a barbarian where you want to do creative things. Like you want to, go in there and you want to, shove an enemy aside or, push them. But you don't always, like in the old rules, that wasn't always a thing that you necessarily wanted to do. But especially with weapon mastery, some of those are going to be save checks. So that's something to where, like, as a barbarian, you can now use those weapon masteries, and you can still extend your rage, which is good. And then you can always take a bonus action. So now, if the enemy says, nope, I'm out, peace out, and then dashes or disengages away, you're not stuck there dropping a rage and having to expend another rage charge. You can just use the bonus action to go. And I know I had someone say to me, it's like, yeah, but it kind of sucks because then you're wasting your bonus action. And it's like, well, barbarians don't really use their bonus action that much. Like at least to my knowledge, there's nothing in the barbarian that requires a bonus action. But it's something to where like you're not going to be able to cast spells, and I think that's going to eliminate a lot of magical items. But there are some items that aren't spells, so like something like the bag of tricks. I believe that's just a bonus action. It's not considered a spell action. At least I don't believe so. I'd have to double check the new rules because now the magic action is its own thing. But that's something to where it's like I feel like Rage shouldn't do that. You just take the little furball out, you throw it, it becomes an animal. But again, I'd have to double check the rules on that. So yeah, and then each time your rage is extended, it lasts until the end of your next turn. So pretty much, you can rage, and you can rage up to 10 minutes, so you can keep that going. So that is the most important mechanic for Barbarian. If you're going to play a Barbarian, read the rules of Rage, because you are going to need that. Next, at level 1, we're also going to get Unarmored Defense. And this one is pretty straightforward. Kind of like Monks, where you can add your Wisdom modifier to your AC. Barbarians can add their Constitution modifier to their AC. They still get the Dexterity, but now they also get Constitution. And again, this is why having the Dexterity at +1 isn't super important. It is useful, but you're going to want that Constitution more, because that's going to give you hit points, and it's going to boost your AC. That's what's going to help you become, unstoppable. Alright, at level 1 you also get 2 weapon masteries. If you go by the amount or the equipment that they give you a great axe and hand axes. So I would pick the masteries associated with them. As I've stated, I like to do the gold thing. We also have 75 gold pieces for starting as a barbarian. So that gives us 125 gold pieces to work with. You do not have, I think the great axe is kind of iconic for a barbarian. I think axes in general kind of are iconic for barbarians. But don't feel the need to stick with those. Like, you can go with a longsword, you can go with a polearm, you can go with any weapon, because you have all training in martial and simple weapons, which I actually need to mark down here. So simple, martial. And then for armor, you also get light, medium, and shield. And that's the other thing, is you can wear a shield and rage at the same time. So that's another thing you can use to boost your AC. If you want to be a more defense-focused barbarian, you can certainly do that. So we're going to go ahead and just say weapon mastery here, because that's something that you are going to want to cater to your character. If your character has, the great sword, they're going to want the mastery associated with the great sword, not the one associated with the great axe. But again, it all depends on what kind of table you're at. I think a lot of DMs say, okay, if you want a great sword instead of a great axe, that's fine. Or they'll do what I do, and they say, okay, here's a bunch of gold, buy whatever you want, make good choices. Okay, next you get Danger Sense. You gain uncanny sense of when things aren't as they should be, giving you an edge when you dodge perils. You have advantage on dexterity saving throws unless you have the incapacitated edition. Incapacitated condition. Sorry, I got a bit of a cold coming on, so if I sound a little stuffy or if I stumble on my words, that's definitely why. Now here's the next good one. Reckless Attack. You can throw aside all concern for defense to attack with increased ferocity. When you make your first attack roll on your turn, you can decide to attack recklessly. Doing so gives you advantage on attack rolls using strength until the start of your next turn, but attack rolls against you have advantage during that time. I will say, always attack recklessly, unless you are unless you are on death's door, attack recklessly. Because here's the thing: it's like it's all about numbers. If you are there with an enemy and you guys are trading blows, you are statistically going to do more damage if you have advantage on your attacks. Because you're ideally going to be the one striking first. And then especially with our gnome here, it actually makes a lot more sense. Because again, we have that savage attacker to maximize our damage. And then every barbarian has their rage damage bonus to maximize their damage. So definitely attack recklessly. There are other abilities later that give you other bonuses for when you attack recklessly. So I definitely recommended just every time attack recklessly, unless you are on death's doorstep and you have 1 HP left. In which case you probably shouldn't be fighting. You should probably be getting out of there and letting the healer kind of tag you for a little bit of healing. Next thing we get, we're going to skip the subclass for just a second. You gain Primal Knowledge. You gain proficiency in another skill of your choice from the skill list of barbarians available to barbarians at level 1. In addition, when your rage is active, you can channel primal power when you attempt certain tasks. When you make an ability check using strength, even if it normally uses you can make a strength ability check, even if it normally uses a different ability. Acrobatics, intimidation, perception, stealth, or survival. When you use this ability, your strength represents primal power coursing through you, honing your agility. And so basically, it's kind of like, the way Wolverine can kind of smell. It's like it's part of his savage power. So we get one of those. And I did say I wanted. Let's go with survival, because we do have a +1 there. So we'll take what we can get with any bonus there. And I feel that kind of makes sense. It's kind of that feral, he's going to the ground going, he went this way. Alright, now let me just check that real quick. Yep, that's just listing the ones available. Alright, so now we get to our subclass. As I said, we are doing the World Tree Barbarians. So to give you a little overview, barbarians who follow the path of the World Tree connect to the cosmic tree Yggdrasil through their rage. This tree grows among the outer planes, connecting them to each other in the material plane. These barbarians draw on the tree's magic for vitality and as a means of dimensional travel. So that all sounds really awesome, and there's a lot of cool things in there. They basically have a way to. It's kind of weird because it's kind of like a crowd control barbarian, but it's still very much damage. So you have the ability to pull things, to you, or pull enemies to you with your thing. So again, if that enemy is getting away, you can just go, no, you don't, and do the get over here, and then they're trapped. Yeah, they're not going anywhere. But for this class, the only thing we're getting at level 3 is Vitality of the Tree. Your rage taps into the life force of the World Tree. You gain the following benefits. Vitality Surge. When you activate your rage, you gain a number of temporary hit points equal to your barbarian level. And then Life-Giving Force. At the start of each of your turns, while your rage is active, you can choose another creature within 10 feet of yourself to gain temporary hit points. To determine the number of temporary hit points, roll a number of d6s equal to your rage damage bonus and add them together. If any of these temporary hit points remain when your rage ends, they vanish. So that right there, that's a good one. And this is a barbarian that very much is going to want to work with the party. Both when they use their movement ability that I mentioned earlier, you get that at level 6. But with this one, just the ability to be near your allies and go, hey, here's some temporary hit points, when you're going to rage, and you're going to rage anyway. And at the same time, it's I think most combat, your party is going to start fairly close together. So, even if they're a little further away, you can move 10 or 20 feet, rage, give them the temporary hit points, and then go forth and, damage enemies. And you don't have to worry about, well, if I do that, I'm not going to be able to close the distance, I'll lose my rage, because again, you just use the bonus action to keep your rage going. And this is why I like this book so much. So many people are complaining about some of the sillier things in this. And don't get me wrong, it's not a perfect book, but the fact that they have fixed rage to where you can still use it, and it's not a detriment if you don't use it exclusively to attack. That's great. Yeah, so this one is basically just, bonus hit points for you and bonus hit points for your allies. So, vitality of the world tree. Here we go, and then we get nothing at level 6 for this subclass. But level 6, as I mentioned, is the branching trees. And in fact, let's go ahead, I'll read the rest of the subclass. So, level 6, branches of the tree. Whenever a creature you can see starts to turn within 30 feet while your reach is active, you can take a reaction to summon spectral branches of the world tree around it. The target must succeed on a strength saving throw, 8 plus your strength modifier plus proficiency bonus, or be teleported to an unoccupied space you can see within 5 feet of yourself, or in the nearest unoccupied space that you can see. After the target teleports, you can reduce its speed to 0 until the end of the current turn. A lot of this is important because one of the things you can do is pull your allies. Because your allies can choose to fail their dex save or their strength save. So they decide to fail their strength save. And then it says you can reduce its speed to 0. Not that you have to or that it is. You can, meaning you get to make the choice. So you can pull your ally out of danger. And because... Actually, that would be an interesting one. Because opportunity attacks only work if the target is moving willingly. So if I do that, and the target willingly fails its dex save, fails its strength save, does that count as moving willingly? That's interesting. That's one of those weird rules things where like I would probably say because you're failing the save intentionally, you are wanting to move, then yeah, I'm gonna say that's probably gonna provoke an opportunity attack, but I don't know. I guess it would depend on how it all played out. I don't think there's too many things where you're gonna worry about that too much. Although it does say teleport. Hold on a second. Yeah, they do call it a teleport, so teleporting doesn't provoke opportunity attack. So no, I rescind my previous decision. It's a teleport. Teleporting does not provoke opportunity attacks. You're fine. At level 10, you get Battering Roots. During your turn, your reach is 10 feet greater with any melee weapon that has a heavy or versatile property, as tendrils of the World Tree extend from you. When you hit with such a weapon on your turn, you can activate the Push or Topple Mastery property in addition to a different Mastery property that you're using with that weapon. So here's an interesting build that I'll probably do one day because it sounds fun. So I think it's pikes get an extra 10 feet of distance. And then bugbears get an extra 5 feet of distance. Or no, pikes get an extra 5 feet, so that it's 10 altogether. Bugbears get an additional 5. And then this world tree gets you another 10. So now I'm imagining like the Mr. Fantastic bugbear just like swinging, and then with the with the vines and stuff, and so he's just one arm swinging this thing like a wild man. So that's what I'm imagining there. I'll do that one time. Just don't let me forget. Remind me that I gotta do the bugbear at some point. Okay, travel along the world tree. When you activate your rage, as a bonus action while your rage is active, you can teleport up to 60 feet to an unoccupied space you can see. In addition, once per rage, you can increase the range of that teleport to 150 feet. When you do so, you can also bring up to 6 willing creatures who are within 10 feet of you. Each creature teleports to an unoccupied space of your choice within 10 feet of your destination space. So basically, it's just a way to teleport, which is another good thing. It's kind of like a Misty Step thing going. And then that's the last thing you get from the World Tree. That's the level 14 one. So yeah, so this is our Barbarian here. As always, you're going to want to go here and make sure you add your modifiers and your proficiencies to all these. I think by now most of you guys know how to do it, but it's pretty simple. Oh, that's the other thing I forgot. Tool proficiencies. They get a gaming set, and I decided to go with Dragon Chest. I completely forgot to put that in. Dragon Cheese. But yeah, so go ahead, fill these ones out. Passive Perception is 10 plus your bonuses. We're proficient, so that's going to be 2 and 3, so passive perception is going to be 13. Yeah, and we don't have to pick up out any spells. We do technically have to. The other thing I can't remember if I mentioned, but with the Gnomish lineage, Those spells, you can choose whether you use Wisdom, Intelligence, or Charisma to cast those. Again, it's not going to matter with these because I don't think these have any saves associated with them. But maybe if like another effect says like, oh, you can't cast with this spell or with this stat or something, then that's going to be a problem. But otherwise, yeah, you'll just choose whichever one of these is the highest. In this case, we're just going to go ahead and use Wisdom. But yeah, that is Dimble Fiddlefen, the very ferocious forest gnome of the world tree. So, hope you guys like that one. I feel that was a funny one. I'm glad it just chance made us have a gnome barbarian because that's always a fun thing, just imagining the small angry person with a weapon too big for him. So thank you for joining me. Until then, keep doing what makes you awesome. Thank you very much, and goodbye.